Jane, you can deal with some very tough situations with dialogue, professional dialogue, I believe. There's a story I'd love to hear from you about a dirty old prison, large, with a bad reputation, that felt completely betrayed that they were sold off by the government. And rather than working in Her Majesty's service, they found themselves in a privatized G4S contract where a commercial company would be making money from the prison. It's hard to imagine what it would be like inside that prison, also full of prisoners. You had a bit of courage, I think, and a bit of a bit of confidence to step into that.
I was very excited to have the opportunity. So I was commissioned, our company was, by G4S to support the mobilization process of this privatization, which is 6 months from the contract being awarded to the keys being handed over, and also to support a little bit beyond that. But I'll just tell the story today about that 6 months. And I was delighted. I'd worked in prisons in the UK for quite a long time and had known people who worked at Birmingham, knew a lot about it by reputation. And so for me, as with the other people in G4S, this was a really exciting opportunity to have an impact on, this, as you say, this place that had such a bad reputation. And it didn't feel that was fair. I guess maybe I'm a bit romantic, but I had the idea that actually with the right input, something really special could happen there. And so did colleagues in G4S. So when we went along, though, the first day, I know we were all a little bit nervous. There was 3 of us.
I heard 1 or 2 people say, "You've taken on some work in Birmingham prison being privatized." I can tell you what's going to happen there. It's going to go up in smoke. You're nuts to be doing that work.
Yeah. And it was a very unionized situation. We've made another recording telling that story, if it's helpful for people to listen to that. But this was about walking through the doors and getting the feel for the place and meeting the people and starting to think. We had a plan about how we would address things, but starting to really get a feel for what was going to be possible. But I went in with the first time with the project manager and the mobilization and transformation lead. And the 3 of us went together. And, as much as we were going in to meet, maybe I should just backtrack a little bit, because we were walking into the prison, but I also was working with the G4S team to help them to get aligned about how we were going to approach this.
So the G4S team you're describing, were they the ones who wrote and won the contract?
Most of them, yeah. Most of the people who are on the mobilization team were also involved in the bid writing, so that they knew what had been promised.
They'd won the contract, the prison would be privatized, and now they're thinking, how do we
do
find
that?
out what's going on in the prison, how it works, and how do we make the change?
Yeah.
That includes change of role, change of uniform, change of pay.
Name badge. So they didn't like, in Birmingham, the reputation was they didn't like wearing a name badge. G4S, you actually have your name on your badge, and you could be called Mr. Garrett by the prisoners, which the staff in Birmingham we knew didn't like. So they were this range of changes that were going to come in. But the G4S team came from different prisons within their estates. They had different approaches. And getting them aligned was important. HR, I know, had said that they didn't want us to be talking with anybody. I was there, we've got to go in, we've got to hear, we've got to start to build those relationships and engage with people. They were very cautious about it.
So your dialogic approach was to engage with as many people as open as you could to understand. And there were some elements in the G4S team which were saying, don't engage until the last minute. Yeah.
We've got this whole legal process of TUPE and pensions. And so, it's not good we'll give the game away and do something wrong. So they were very cautious about that. But the MD, Jerry Petherick, was very up for an open dialogic process. So I had him on my side. So that was helpful. But when we walked in on this first day, we then realized there were lots of other hurdles to engagement, because the person who was running the prison, the governor, he was also cautious about us going in and meeting people. So we had to really work to be able to start that engagement process, which we did. And so we spent a good period of time meeting the staff hearing from them directly. We'd heard from their unions, but we want to hear from them directly and let them know that G4S was a kind of listening organisation, I guess, that we did care. They were very, very demoralised. They'd been through a 2-year process through the prison service, the government tendering their contract, not knowing what was going to happen. And then they'd heard this announcement, and they talked about crying when they heard the announcement that G4S was going to take over. So there was a lot of pain, residual pain from previous years, from many, many years, but also kind of pain in that moment of thinking they were going to be privatized. They talked about kind of the pride of being part of Her Majesty's, at the time, prison service. And so for them, what it meant to be part of the private sector was a massive identity shift that they weren't looking forward to. So the work initially was engaging the staff much more broadly than the unions. And as we did, we discovered all sorts of different groups. There were people that working there hadn't been told about. We had a whole rank of principal officers that were in uniforms, which was a grade that the public sector had got rid of, apart from a few in the system who didn't want to change to the new grade and were allowed to stay with their uniforms on. And there was a group of them. There was quite a large group, 6 or 7, 8 of them, and nobody told us about them. They didn't really have clear roles. They were just there in the prison. Now, the only way we found out about them was going around talking to other people and discovering. So we started some formal sessions where we gathered people as kind of storytelling to dispel myths about the private sector and to have myths dispelled about Birmingham and what staff were like there and what the place was like. And then a much more informal, just hearing stories, how people were thinking. I remember the MD kind of used to come around with me, and people were really wanted to meet him, wanted to actually look into his eyes and see what he was like, and were really reassured by the person that they met. So that was the initial thing, and that was more difficult than you might imagine. If you give me a day, I'll tell you all the stories about the challenges. And it was really critical to enable the mobilization team to do the work that they had to do, their due diligence work, and they had to check all the buildings and all the equipment, and they had to write risk registers, and they had to start to prepare there was a lot of work to be done. Without the cooperation of the staff in the prison, it would have been impossible.
So staff in Birmingham prison had been worried about their jobs, whether they'd have jobs and whether they would at the end, and what would change and so on. How would you describe it as dialogic, what you did? What was the dialogic element of it?
Yeah. So the first thing was engagement, allowing people to speak about their experiences and have that heard, taken seriously and taken into account in planning and decisions that were being made. Now, I couldn't do that, but what I could do was hear and then convene groups of people. So sometimes it was convened. There was an issue that came out, which was about a drug team that, nobody knew about, that was going to be quite critical how that was managed, this drug treatment team. So I was then convening with some people from G4S and the staff working on that project to start to think about how that would be managed. So getting all the information and knowledge out rather than hidden in these little pockets. And then it could affect the decisions that were made organizationally and individually, because individuals could decide, was I going to apply for another job at a prison down the road and stay in the government sector rather than moving to G4S? And without information, I couldn't make that decision.
I hear you watching the culture. People presumably could make it difficult for G4S. There could be walkouts. There could be problems from prisoners. In fact, the contract required quite a big cover for that, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
I see you kind of connecting people, continually matchmaking and saying, well, you should talk to him, or why don't you do that? Or did you know this is happening?
Did you know this? We need to do something about that. And also signaling a different way of working that G4S supported. So as well as engaging staff, I engaged some of the prisoners, and again, helping to manage their expectations about what would happen when G4S managed the place. So that was showing something quite different. Alongside that engagement, we were starting to understand the culture and some of the policies and procedures that needed work. We then started to help the staff prepare for the transition. So that over a 3-month period, they were getting ready what was going to happen when the keys were handed over. Because the next day, people were employed by G4S, not by the prison service. People would have to wear a different uniform. 700 staff needed to have a different uniform. Managers used to wear suits, would wear a uniform. So there was a lot that needed to change. Prisoners might kick off. There might be problems. How was that going to be managed?
Kick off means what?
Meaning kind of either cause a disruption, maybe refuse to go back in their cells, or not come out for food, or not comply with security, not be willing to be searched, whatever it was. So not comply really, or worse. What happened as I started to support teams of people in the prison to prepare for that handover, they realized that they were going to be there. It was almost, I wasn't expecting it, but it was almost like they thought G4S are taking over the prison. G4S staff will appear on the handover day and do it. And suddenly the penny dropped. No, it will be us. We'll still be here. We'll still be running the place. So before the handover, that was a significant change of identity for them to recognize, no, it will just be us. We're responsible. We're accountable. We make the plans. We will still be managing the prison. And I think that was a really important to know that so that they could prepare, but also to know it in identity terms. This is still our prison. We'll be employed by somebody else, but it's still our prison. And that was really important in their pride. So we went through all of that. The handover day, there was overnight, the G4S flag was raised. They painted the reception area in G4S red overnight.
That the area all the staff walk through as they come into the prison was redecorated. Yeah.
Redecorated overnight. And when I joined them, and it was on a Saturday, the first day, 1st of October, when I joined them, there was a party. There was a bit of a party atmosphere. So a reminder that because of all the fears, there were, like riot squads on hand. There were empty places in prisons across the country in case something happened and prisoners had to be moved. All of that was still in place.
And that was seen as a real prospect originally.
Yes, still, yeah. And still they had to have it in place. But yet inside, people were excited. I remember one officer said to me, her husband worked there as well, and she said, it was a bit like the first day back at school. We were all excited. We had a takeout, got a takeaway last night. It was, we got our uniforms out and we were all ready. That was a positive sense of anticipation rather than the negative sense of anticipation that people had just 6 months earlier. So it was remarkable, really, what was achieved.
What a story.
Oh, what a story.
What I hear is by concentrating on the culture and the cultural change, on the identity change, working in the way you did, was closely integrated with all the operational change that had to happen.
Yeah.
But I suspect the possibility of it not working out was far greater than people might now realize looking back.
Yeah, it's the sort of work that's kind of invisible. The more better you do it, the more invisible it is in a funny way. And yeah, happy to talk for hours about it. It was a very professionally fulfilling and very meaningful piece of work, to be honest.
And in the background, there were riot squads ready to step in on the day of the handover. There was the provision to rehouse all the prisoners in that prison, in other prisons around the country. And they all went home having done nothing. It was a non-event for them.
Yeah, it was. And G4S paid for a kind of Indian takeaway to be delivered, and everybody had really great food at lunchtime together. It really was unbelievable, the party sort of feel to it. But serious work as well.
Well done.
Thank you for
terrific
asking.
Story. Thank you. You will hear more stories from Jane. She has them. I have as well. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.